I still remember the smell of the basement that night, urine, metal, and something like fear burned into the walls. That's where I found my wife tied to a chair, whispering my name through lips too dry to bleed. My own daughter did that. My little girl. If you're hearing this right now, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you first heard about my story. Because I need to know how far the truth has traveled and whether the world still believes in justice or if mercy really has a price. My name is Mark Sullivan, and this is how my daughter tried to kill her own mother, and how I learned that sometimes forgiveness is the cruelest punishment of all. The first thing that hit me wasn't the darkness. It was the silence. You spend 40 years in the same house. You learn its heartbeat, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboard near the kitchen, the sound of Linda humming along to Coltrane while she waters her ferns. But that night, the house had no pulse. It was just past 8 when I pulled into the driveway. 2 weeks in Seattle had left me drained. My brother's heart surgery had gone wrong twice, and sleep had been a stranger. All I wanted was to walk through that door, smell the lavender lotion Linda always used, and hear her soft voice asking if I'd eaten. Instead, the windows were black. Not a single light on. My first thought was the power's out. But the streetlights were glowing fine. The neighbor's porch lamp across the road cut through the November mist like a watchful eye. I grabbed my duffel from the truck and went to the front door. My hands were trembling, not from fatigue, something colder. The kind of unease that starts in your gut and spreads like ice water through your veins. The key jammed for a second before turning. The smell hit me first, stale air, sour and unfamiliar. A house that had been shut too long. I flicked the light switch by the door. Nothing. Linda, my voice cracked against the dark. No answer. My phone light cut a narrow path through the living room. The furniture looked wrong. Sofa pushed out of place, pillows on the floor. The clock stopped at 7:42. The small jazz radio that usually sat on the counter was gone. That's when I heard it. A sound so faint, I thought I'd imagined it, a dull rhythmic thumping, like someone knocking from far away. Once, twice. Pause. Then again. I froze. The sound came from below. The basement. Linda, I called again, louder this time. My voice bounced off the walls, came back smaller. The knocking stopped. Then after a heartbeat, came a muffled moan. My blood went cold. I ran to the basement door. A heavy padlock hung from the latch, brand new, thick steel. I'd never seen it before. My stomach twisted. Linda, it's me, can you hear me? There was a weak cry from the other side. Mark! The voice was hoarse, broken. Hers, hold on. I tore through the garage like a madman until I found the crowbar behind the tool bench. My hands were slick with sweat. The first hit glanced off the lock, sending a spark into the dark. The second bent it. The third snapped it clean. The door swung open, and a wall of stench rolled out, urine, mold, and something metallic that made my throat close. I stumbled down the stairs, my phone light shaking. Linda, at the bottom of the steps, huddled in the corner beneath the bare bulb socket, was my wife. She was barefoot, knees drawn to her chest, her nightgown stained dark. Her hair clung to her face in gray, greasy strands. She looked up at me like she was seeing a ghost. Mark, her voice cracked into a whisper. Is it really you? My knees buckled. I was beside her before I even knew I'd moved, pulling her into my arms. She felt like paper. Her skin cold, her breath shallow. Oh my God. Linda, what happened? She shook her head, trembling. You were gone. I was in here. The door. Her words broke apart into sobs. I looked around the room. There was nothing but a filthy blanket, a plastic bucket, and an overturned chair. The light bulb had been unscrewed. She'd been locked in darkness. Who did this to you? I whispered. Her eyes darted toward the stairs. "Rachel," she said. I needed to rest. She locked it. My stomach turned to lead. Rachel, our Rachel. But she'd already drifted into confusion, muttering about the dog we hadn't had in 10 years, about dinner on the stove. The disease was stealing her again. I wrapped her in my jacket and lifted her bones, pressing through thin skin. She groaned, whispering, "It's so cold, Mark." "I know, sweetheart. I've got you." Each step up felt heavier than the last. The silence in the house thickened, pressing on my chest. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed, faintly swallowed by distance. I laid her on the couch, covered her with a throw blanket, and dialed 911 with shaking hands. My voice came out flat, detached, like I was reporting someone else's life. "My wife's been locked in our basement. I don't know how long. She's barely conscious." The dispatcher's questions blurred together, address, age, condition. I answered mechanically, eyes scanning the room. The furniture had been rearranged. Boxy pieces stacked by the window. A framed photo of our family was missing from the mantel. And on the kitchen counter, where Linda's pill organizer should have been, was nothing but dust. I knelt beside her. Her lips were cracked, the corners bleeding. I pressed a wet cloth to them. She winced. "Rachel did this," I whispered again. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "She said you told her to. That it was safer for me down there. That the voices couldn't find me." I felt something break inside me. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "no one told her that. No one's." The wail of sirens grew louder outside. Red and blue lights flickered through the window. The paramedics came fast, professional, lifting her, gently checking vitals. One of them looked at me with that mix of pity and suspicion people reserve for family tragedies. "Sir, how long has she been down there?" I don't know," I stammered. "I was gone for 2 weeks. My daughters was supposed to look after her." The younger paramedic met the older one's eyes, then turned away without a word. I followed them out to the ambulance, clutching my coat around me. The night air smelled like frost and diesel. As they closed the doors, I caught one last glimpse of Linda's face, eyes half open, searching like she was still trapped down there. The ambulance pulled away, sirens slicing through the quiet street. I stood there on the driveway, staring at the dark house, its windows blank, like the eyes of something dead. My mind replayed her words again and again. Rachel locked the door. Our daughter. Our only child. Inside the house, the basement door still hung open, the broken lock lying on the floor. A cold draft whispered up from below, carrying that same sour smell. I stepped back into the hallway, my knees weak. The phone in my hand was slick with sweat. Somewhere deep down, something in me already knew whatever I was about to uncover would change everything. But right then, all I could do was stare at the stairs leading down into that blackness. Linda's blood had stained my sleeve where I'd held her. My heart hammered so loud it drowned out the sirens fading in the distance. I swallowed hard, voice barely a whisper. "Who the hell did this to you, Linda?" The shadows didn't answer. They just waited. The hospital smelled like bleach and despair. Linda lay beneath a web of tubes, her skin almost translucent under the fluorescent light. Machines breathed for her, beeped for her. I sat in a plastic chair by her bed, still wearing the same jacket that reeked of the basement. I hadn't slept in 30 hours, maybe more. A nurse named Carla took her vitals every few minutes. "She's dehydrated, malnourished," she said quietly, as if afraid the truth might bruise me further. "It's a miracle she's alive." I nodded, numb. Miracle wasn't the word I'd use. 2 uniformed officers waited outside the room. When they finally stepped in, the older one introduced himself, Detective Harris, from the county sheriff's office, mid-50s, gray hair cut military short. The younger one couldn't have been more than 25. His badge looked new, still shiny, like it hadn't learned what tragedy smelled like yet. Mr. Sullivan Harris said, his tone measured. "We're sorry you're going through this. We just need to ask a few questions to understand what happened." I rubbed my eyes. "Ask whatever you need." He opened a small notebook. "You mentioned your wife has Alzheimer's. Who's been caring for her while you were out of town?" "My daughter," I said. "Rachel. She's 36, works as a senior accountant downtown." The pen stopped. "And she lives with you?" "No. She and her husband, Ben, have a condo in Chicago. She came to stay with Linda while I was in Seattle." Harris looked up. "Volunteered?" "Yes. I didn't ask her. She offered." I remembered the phone call like it was yesterday, Rachel's voice bright and eager. "Don't worry, Dad. Mom and I will be fine. Go help Uncle Joe. I'll handle everything." And I believed her, because Rachel had always been the responsible one, organized, polished, reliable to a fault. She used to color-code her school notebooks as a kid, lining them up by subject on her shelf. When she got her first job, she bought Linda a pearl bracelet with her first paycheck. She called every Sunday, even after she married Ben. That was my Rachel. Or at least, that's who I thought she was. Harris flipped to another page. "When was the last time you spoke to her?" 3, maybe 4 days ago. I called to check in. She said Linda was doing great, eating well, sleeping through the night. She even joked that Mom remembered where she hid the TV remote." The younger cop scribbled notes. "And after that, I texted her a few times. She said she was busy. I figured she was just tired from caregiving." Harris exchanged a look with the rookie. "Did you at any point give your daughter access to your financial accounts, or sign any documents granting her power of attorney?" I frowned. "No. Why would I? Everything's handled through my lawyer, Harold Kent. Rachel has no reason to touch our finance." He nodded slowly, but his eyes said something else, something colder. "All right. We'll need to confirm that." Before I could ask what that meant, the young officer's radio crackled. He turned away, murmured a few words, then looked back at Harris uneasy. The detective sighed, closing his notebook. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm going to send a team to your house to collect evidence. The padlock on your basement door, it wasn't standard hardware store issue. It's commercial grade. We'll dust it for prints." He paused. "Do you know anyone who might have had access to the house while you were gone?" I hesitated. "Rachel had the spare keys. And Ben. He was helping with some repairs last month." Harris's jaw tightened. "All right. We'll be in touch as soon as we know more." They left me there, the hum of machines filling the silence. I stared at Linda's face. Her lips were pale, cracked. I could still see faint bruises around her wrists, shaped like fingerprints. Rachel wouldn't do that, I thought. She wouldn't. But the truth had already started to crawl under my skin like a parasite. 2 hours later, I was pacing the hospital hallway when Harris returned. He looked grimmer than before. The young officer trailed behind him, clutching a small evidence bag. "Mr. Sullivan Harris," began carefully, "our forensic unit processed the basement door. The padlock, specifically." He nodded to the rookie who lifted the bag. Inside, under clear plastic, was the silver padlock, scratched, dented from my crowbar. Harris's voice lowered. "We found 2 clear sets of fingerprints." I stared at him, waiting for the words that I already knew were coming. "One set's yours," he continued. "The other belongs to your daughter, Rachel Sullivan." The hallway seemed to tilt. I grabbed the wall to steady myself. That's impossible," I whispered. She was supposed to take care of her." Harris didn't answer. He just gave me that look cops give when they've seen the pattern too many times, when family turns on family. The rookie cleared his throat softly, almost apologetic. "We'll need to ask her to come in for questioning. Do you know where she is?" Right now, I couldn't find my voice. My throat burned. She told me she had to drive back to Chicago for a client meeting. That was 3 days ago. Harris made a note. We'll locate her. In the meantime, stay available. If she contacts you, don't engage. Call us immediately. They left again, and I just stood there in that sterile hallway, the hum of the vending machine echoing down the corridor. Through the glass, I could see Linda asleep, her chest rising in small, uneven breaths. I pressed my fist against the wall hard until my knuckles screamed. The anger came slow then, all at once, boiling, directionless. I wanted to believe the prince meant nothing, that maybe she'd handled the lock, trying to free her mother, not imprison her. But deep down, beneath all the rationalizing, something inside me began to fracture. My daughter's fingerprints, on the lock that kept her mother in darkness. I felt my nails dig into my palms so hard they drew blood. The pain grounded me, pulled me back from the edge. I didn't cry. I didn't even move. I just stared at my hand trembling against the sterile white wall and whispered the only thing that made sense anymore. What did you do, Rachel? Linda came home 3 days later. Physically, she was stronger, the IV lines gone, color returning to her cheeks, but her mind was like a radio stuck between stations. She drifted in and out of clarity, her eyes chasing ghosts across the room. Every few hours she'd look at me and ask the same question. Where's Rachel, Mark? Did she go to get groceries? She said she'd be right back. Each time my throat tightened around the same lie. She's just busy, sweetheart. She'll be back soon. But the truth sat in my gut like a stone. The police hadn't found Rachel. Her phone was off, her car missing. They'd flagged her credit cards, but nothing had pinged yet. Harris said it could take days. She'll surface, he told me. They always do. I didn't wait for them. I needed to see the damage myself. When I walked into the house again, it felt colder. Even with the furnace running, a chill lingered in the walls, like the house remembered what had happened. The air smelled faintly of bleach and dust, as if someone had tried to scrub away guilt. I went room by room. The living room looked staged. Furniture slightly moved, rugs shifted. The drawer with our financial documents was half open. I pulled it out and dumped everything onto the dining table. There it was. Chaos on paper. Bank statements, loan approvals, insurance forms, all stamped and dated within the last 2 weeks. At first I couldn't make sense of it. Then the words began to align like puzzle pieces. Home equity line of credit approved. Co-signed by Linda Sullivan. Another document. Transfer authorization. $65,000 to Atlas Crypto Holdings, LLC. Linda's signature sat at the bottom, shaky and uneven, like a spider had dragged its legs through ink. I felt my jaw lock. Linda hadn't been lucid enough to sign her own name properly in months. There were more papers. Withdrawal slips, wire transfers, a refinance application for the house we'd paid off 15 years ago. The total drained from our accounts was nearly $180,000. I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles went white. Rachel had access to the house, to our records, to her mother's ID. And Ben, God, that man, I'd never liked him. The kind of smile that never touched his eyes, always selling something, always between deals. He called himself a consultant, but couldn't explain consulting for what. Blockchain investments, he'd said over Thanksgiving dinner last year, waving a fork full of stuffing like a business pitch. It's the future, Mark. Decentralization, passive income. I could double your retirement fund in 6 months. I told him to keep his schemes out of my house. Now sitting at that same table, I realized he hadn't. Rachel must have known how fragile Linda's memory had become, how easy it would be to convince her to sign something for Dad. And the lock on the basement. Jesus Christ. I walked into the study next. The room was dim, curtains drawn. Rachel's old laptop sat on the desk, still plugged in. I hesitated for half a second before opening it. The screen came to life instantly. No password. The desktop was clean, almost sterile. Just one folder labeled Work. Inside, dozens of spreadsheets, tax documents, and one email chain that caught my eye. Subject line: Atlas Fund Proposal. The sender was Banya. The thread stretched weeks back. Hundreds of messages. My stomach churned as I scrolled. They discussed investors' transfers, liquidity funnels. Ben bragged about securing new capital from an easy source. Then I reached one from Rachel, dated the day after I left for Seattle. Rachel, she signed it today. Shaky but good enough. The notary didn't ask questions. We're all set. Ben. You're sure he doesn't suspect anything, Rachel? He's halfway across the country. He'll never know. By the time he's back, we'll have moved it all. Ben. And your mom, Rachel, she won't remember. A few days in the basement won't kill her. My vision blurred. I read it again, slower this time, as if maybe I'd misunderstood, as if maybe basement meant something else, something less monstrous. But it didn't. The words were there in black and white, casual, cold, typed by the hands of my daughter. A few days in the basement won't kill her. The air left my lungs. My hand trembled on the mouse. All the memories of Rachel as a child, the way she'd hug Linda's waist while baking cookies, the late-night talks before college, the laughter, the promises collapsed into ash. I staggered back from the desk. The room spun. The computer screen glowed behind me, that one line burning into my mind like fire etched on glass. I saw Linda's face in the basement again, pale, frightened, whispering my name. My daughter did that. My knees gave out. I sat on the floor staring at the laptop across the room. For a long moment, I couldn't oath. Then something inside me snapped. I got up, grabbed the computer, and hurled it across the room. It hit the wall, shattered pieces scattering across the hardwood, like broken teeth. The sound echoed through the house. Then silence again. Always silence. I pressed my hand over my face, felt the hot sting of tears I didn't even know were coming. My breath came in shallow bursts, half rage, half grief. In the reflection of the shattered screen, I saw my own face lined hollow, older than I'd been just an hour ago. I whispered to no one. The girl who wrote that. She's not my daughter anymore. Harold Kent's office smelled like old leather and coffee. Comfortable things men in my line of work hang on to when the rest of the world starts going sideways. Harold had done our wills, read us the dry clauses about incapacity, like a priest reading scripture. He was calm in a way I had always liked, methodical, unshockable. I wanted that calm that afternoon, like a drink of water. He didn't have it. Mark, he said without preamble, sliding a stack of bank printouts across his desk. This isn't a mistake. His fingers tapped the paper like a metronome. Look, multiple withdrawals, wire transfers out. A home equity line opened last week. All of it signed purportedly by Linda Sullivan. I stared down at the numbers. 179,000. A sum so large and round it felt obscene, like someone had erased the life we'd been building and left a neat hole behind. How, I asked. The question was smaller than the panic that had been building in my chest. Smaller than the way my hands shook. How could she sign for this? Harold rolled the papers toward me. There were copies of notarized documents, a power of attorney form, and a refinance application for our house. The signature looked like Linda's. The notary seal was stamped neat and official, the kind you don't get questioned on until it's too late. Not all notarizations are equal, Harold said. Some notaries ask the right questions, some don't. Some, he spread. His hands are complicit. He said the word like it was a fact, not an accusation. I thought about Rachel's voice, bright, too bright, promising. Don't worry, Dad. I've got Mom. I tasted bile. Harold looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw real anger ripple through his lined face. They set this up to look legitimate. They used Linda's weakness, her memory, her trust. They got her to sign. Then they routed the money through Atlas Crypto Holdings, that company shell. A front. We've run the filings. It's a paper trail to nowhere: offshore accounts, private wallets, the usual laundering playbook. Atlas Crypto Holdings. The name still had that slick modern ring to it, the kind of name that promised futures and growth and zero accountability. Harold's voice made it sound like a skull. "You're saying they stole our life," I said. He didn't answer right away. He pulled open a lower drawer and took out a photograph, one of those small gloss prints. Rachel at 7, grinning with a missing front tooth, Linda beside her hair in a messy bun, both of them sunburned from a cheap summer at the lake. Harold handed it to me, like it was evidence and a weapon. "She's your daughter, Mark," he said softly. "She's your blood. But what they've done goes beyond theft. Look at these medical notes. The hospital reports. Linda had signs consistent with prolonged confinement, dehydration, hypothermia, bruising, consistent with restraint. This wasn't just financial exploitation. It borders on attempted homicide by neglect." The words landed like a blow. I thought of Linda in that basement, dark alone, whispering my name like a prayer. I pictured the bucket in the corner, the thin blanket, the circle of cold. I felt the smell again, the sour, sterile rot of it, and my stomach flipped so violently I nearly retched. "Harold," I said, voice raw. "What do we do?" He leaned forward, fingers steepled. "We do everything the law allows: criminal charges, elder abuse, fraud, unlawful confinement, civil suits for restitution. We file for emergency conservatorship to protect what's left. But I'll be honest, Mark. Criminal justice moves slowly. Money launderers are experts at covering their tracks. Even if we win in court, recovering funds is a long, often losing battle. Long. Losing. It felt like getting hit twice. And the notary I asked, desperate for something to hang on to. Who notarized it? How did they get her there? Harold pursed his lips. "We're tracing that now. But the troubling part is this." He tapped another page, where a small string of texts was printed, communications between Rachel and Ben. They're clinical about timing, transfers, logistics. Then this line. He pushed the paper across until my eyes landed on the sentence I already knew and hated: "Mom won't remember. A few days in the basement won't kill her." The paper blurred as if someone had splashed ink across my view. I felt faint, then furious, then hollow, all in the space of a breath. Harold did not soften. "Mark, they didn't just do a dirty number on your bank account. They used your wife as a tool. That's a level of cruelty that's—" He stopped as if words had failed him. The phone on his desk vibrated. He glanced down, then back at me. "Detective Harris has new information. He wants to question Rachel as soon as she's located. And he may need you to make a statement." I nodded mechanically, not sure my limbs belonged to me. Images of Rachel as a child flashed, her small hand in mine, scraped knees. We'd bandaged her first recital, where she forgot the words, and we clapped the loudest anyway. That child's face felt like another country now, one I'd been exiled from. On the drive home, I stopped at a red light and stared at a billboard advertising some tech company, promising secure decentralized futures. The irony burned. The world celebrated the new currency of untraceable wealth, while lineages were being picked clean by those closest to us. Back at the house, I moved like a man in a dream. Linda had taken to pacing at odd hours, touching the lock on the front door, as if expecting it to bite. The sound of a key in a lock sent her into fits, eyes wide, fingers rubbing the space between her thumb and forefinger until the skin shone white. She'd start muttering about people at the door, about voices that said she should go downstairs. Harold was right. The abuse had not only scarred her body, it had carved deeper into the thing that mattered most, her sense of safety. Every clack of a deadbolt was a shrapnel burst in her memory. She thinks someone's coming for her, I told the nurse the night she refused to sleep. She thinks they'll come back. The nurse poured a cup of chamomile and sat with us in the dim kitchen light. Linda folded her hands and hummed a line of a tune she used to sing when she watered the ferns. For a heartbeat, she was my Linda, the woman who could make stew out of nothing and make the neighbor kids feel welcome. Then the old fear closed over her face like a shutter. I found myself staring at the photo Harold had given me, Rachel with the missing tooth, and felt a hard, cold thing settle in my chest. If the law couldn't fix this, if prosecutors and judges and forensic teams only moved at the speed of papers and calendars, then what? Sit and wait while their numbers dwindled into nothing. Watch as the house we'd paid off fell into the hands of some slick shell company. I crumpled the photograph in my fist until the paper creased. If the law doesn't do it, I said aloud to the empty kitchen, to the nurse, to Linda dozing in the living room, then I will. The sound of my voice in that quiet house was small, but it felt like a promise. Not revenge in the bitter cinematic way, not a movie plot vendetta, but a vow to see every stone unturned, to pull every thread until this thing unraveled, to make sure the person who had turned my daughter into a stranger could not simply walk away. Linda stirred and mumbled something I couldn't quite catch. I smoothed a blanket over her and looked at the door to the basement, remembering the way the light had failed there, how absolute the darkness had been. If the law doesn't do it, I repeated softly, more to myself than anyone else, then I will. I picked up the crumpled photo and placed it face down on the table. The paper kept a faint line of my thumbprint in the corner, a mark I couldn't erase. Outside, the street was still and cold. The house sat in it like a thing wounded. I stood at the window and watched my reflection in the glass. An old man with several new reasons to be dangerous. The morning the FBI showed up at my door, the frost hadn't even melted off the porch rail. 2 black SUVs pulled up, slow, quiet, as if the agents were trying not to wake the dead. A man stepped out, mid-40s, tall, cropped hair, posture like he'd never stopped being a Marine. He wore a dark field jacket and carried himself like the cold didn't touch him. "Mr. Weiss?" "Sullivan," he said, flashing his badge. "Special Agent Miller, Financial Crimes Division." "Mind if I come in?" The way he said it, you knew it wasn't a question. He followed me into the kitchen, set down a file thick with printed emails, receipts, and photographs. "You've heard about Atlas Crypto Holdings?" he asked. I nodded. "Well, your daughter and her husband have been busy. They transferred your funds into a series of crypto wallets, then converted a portion into privacy coins. We've traced those coins to an exchange in Austin, Texas. Yes. They're moving fast. Whoever's helping them knows the system." "Helping them?" Miller flipped open the file. "Shell accounts, fake IDs, forged passports. There's at least one co-conspirator offshore, someone feeding them routes for laundering. But the bigger issue," he tapped a line of data. "Rachel and Ben just disappeared from their Chicago condo. Neighbors say they left 3 nights ago." He slid over a photograph taken from the condo's trash chute, a crumpled plane itinerary. "One way, to Costa Rica." Below it, a printed email to a bank in San Jose, requesting an account set up for Atlas Strategic Partners. My jaw clenched. "They're running." Miller nodded. "They know the wall are closing in. But crypto leaves fingerprints too. They can move fast. We move faster." He spoke with that Marine precision. No wasted words, no wasted breath. "We'll need your cooperation, Mr. Sullivan. You know their habits, their friends, their weaknesses. That could save us weeks." I hesitated. Part of me wanted nothing to do with the chase. Another part, the part that still smelled the basement, every time I closed my eyes, wanted to be there when they were caught. I'll do whatever you need. Good, he said. Then you'll want to see this. He handed me a printout, an intercepted message from Ben, to someone named RK offshore. The subject line read, "Final move. Funds are clear. Transfer complete by Thursday. We'll withdraw from exchange before sunset and catch flight. No trace left. Rachel's nervous, but she'll manage. She thinks her father suspects nothing." Miller looked at me. That was sent 48 hours ago. That night, I barely slept. The house creaked with the winter wind, and every sound felt like a countdown. Linda stirred in her sleep, murmuring nonsense about keys and doors. I sat in the dark living room with my phone in hand, staring at the screen, half hoping it would ring, half terrified it would. It did. 6:14 a.m. Mr. Sullivan Miller's voice clipped efficient. "We've got a lead. They're trying to liquidate the crypto through a broker in Austin. We're setting up surveillance. I'll need you on standby." He didn't have to explain. My daughter had stolen our savings, locked her mother in a basement, and was now trying to vanish into a tropical paradise with blood money. I wasn't going to sit home and wait for the verdict. 2 days later, I was in a borrowed SUV parked outside a nondescript warehouse near the outskirts of Austin. Through binoculars, I could see the neon sign, Crypto Stream Exchange, Secure Digital Investments. Ben's kind of church. Miller sat beside me, earpiece crackling with field chatter. "Target Alpha entering now," a voice said through the comms. Male mid-30s, 6'1", black jacket, ball cap. Ben. I caught only glimpses of him between the trucks and steel doors, a tall figure with a duffel slung across his shoulder. My hands clenched the steering wheel hard enough to hurt. "Alpha confirmed," Miller said. "Hold positions until he makes contact." Minutes crawled by. Then, "We have transfer activity. 90,000 in crypto moving to fiat. This is it." Miller's hand went up. "Go." The building erupted, doors slamming, agents pouring in from every direction. FBI hands where I can see them. From our vantage point, I saw Ben freeze, then bolt toward the back exit seat. 2 agents followed, but he was fast, too fast. The comms went wild. Suspect fleeing West Alley. Possible weapon. Miller cursed under his breath and jumped out of the SUV, sprinting toward the chaos. I followed before I even thought about it. The cold air burned my lungs as I ran. Around the corner, a flash of movement. Ben diving into a gray sedan, engine roaring. "Tires," someone yelled. Shots cracked. The car fishtailed, clipped a dumpster, and tore off down the service road, trailing smoke. By the time we reached the corner, he was gone. Miller swore, then turned to me, panting. "We'll get him. He's got nowhere to hide." But there's more. You need to hear this. He pulled out his phone and showed me a message on the secure feed. "Rachel Sullivan, flagged at Dallas-Fort Worth International. She's trying to board a flight to Costa Rica," he said. "Fake passport, cash in hand. We've got agents en route." I didn't breathe until the next call came 2 hours later. Miller's tone was cool, professional, but I heard the undercurrent, the one that meant it was over. "DFW confirmed. We've got her." I drove up that night with him, not as a cop, not as a witness, just a father who needed to see. The airport lights turned the tarmac into daylight. Inside the security checkpoint, 2 agents stood with a woman in cuffs. Her hair was tied back, expensive coat, wrinkled eyes hollow. Rachel. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not the confident professional, not the daughter who once told me I was her hero. Just a woman cornered. In one hand, an evidence bag with 50,000 in cash. In the other, the fake passport, Rebecca Carter. Costa Rica one way. When she saw me, she froze. For a long moment, neither of us moved. "Rachel Sullivan Miller," said formally, "you're under arrest for financial fraud, elder abuse, and unlawful confinement. You have the right to remain silent. But Rachel wasn't listening. She looked past the agents straight at me. Her lips trembled, but her eyes stayed dry sharp. "Dad," she said quietly, voice steady in a way that made my skin crawl. "You'll never understand why I did this." I stepped closer, my throat tightening. "Try me." She gave a small, sad smile, the kind people wear when they've already accepted damnation. "You spent your whole life saving everyone but yourself. Mom, Uncle Joe, the neighbors, and strangers. I just decided to stop saving." The agents led her away before I could speak. Through the glass walls, I watched her disappear into a tunnel of sterile light, flanked by uniforms. My reflection stared back at me from the glass. An old man, empty-handed. Behind me, Miller murmured, "For what it's worth, Mr. Sullivan, this is the beginning of justice." I didn't answer. Justice, maybe. But no verdict could bring back what she'd stolen: trust, peace, the last good years Linda and I might have had. As they loaded Rachel into the back of the SCCUV, she turned once more, eyes meeting mine through the window. There was no remorse there, only something unreadable, something cold and final. For the first time I realized she wasn't running from punishment. She was running from me. The courthouse in downtown Cleveland felt colder than the January wind outside. Even with the heat turned up, there was something about those marble walls, how they carried every whisper, every sigh, and every lie that could chill the marrow. Rachel sat at the defense table in a beige jumpsuit, wrists cuffed, her hair tied back. Too tight. The last time I'd seen her without makeup was when she was 16, crying over a college rejection letter. Now, her face was bare, sharp, almost skeletal. They read out the charges like a roll call of betrayal, elder abuse, unlawful confinement, financial fraud, identity theft. Each one landed like a nail hammered into the coffin of whatever I'd once thought family meant. Ben was still missing, last seen somewhere near the Mexican border. Miller told me the Bureau was tracking every crypto wallet tied to him, but I could see it in his eyes. Men like Ben knew how to vanish. Rachel didn't even look for him. She didn't look for me either. She just sat there, eyes straight ahead, lips pressed together like she'd swallowed her own confession. When they called my name to testify, the world went still. I walked up, raised my right hand, swore to tell the truth. The courtroom light hit me like a spotlight, too bright, too honest. The prosecutor, a woman named Jane Alvarez, greeted me quietly. Her voice was calm, respectful. She had the kind of confidence that came from seeing too many fathers like me in too many rooms like this. "I see, sir. Sullivan," she said, "you were out of town during the events in question." "Yes." My voice echoed more than I expected. 2 weeks. Seattle. My brother was in the hospital. "And your wife, Linda Sullivan, who was caring for her." "My daughter," I said. The words burned on the way out. Rachel flinched. Just barely. Alvarez nodded. "And what did you find when you returned home?" I told them everything. The darkness. The smell. The padlock. The sound of Linda's voice calling my name through the floorboards. The way she trembled when I carried her up those stairs. Every sentence felt like peeling skin off an old wound. When I finished, you could have heard a pin drop. The jurors stared down at their notes, like they couldn't bear to look at me. Alvarez turned to the bench. "Your Honor, may the record reflect the severity of this testimony." Rachel's lawyer, a man named Gerard Fields, polished, expensive, and soulless, rose from his chair. "Objection, Your Honor. The witness is editorializing." "Sustained," the judge said. "Stick to the facts, Mr. Sullivan." Facts. Like my wife had been locked underground by our daughter. Like 180,000 was gone. Like trust had an expiration date. When I stepped down, I passed Rachel's table. She looked up for the first time. For half a second I saw her, my little girl, behind those tired, frightened eyes. But it vanished as quickly as it came. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my motel room, staring at the ceiling, hearing Linda's cries in the walls again. The next morning, the defense began their case. Gerard Fields painted Rachel as the victim, a woman manipulated by her husband, coerced into signing papers gaslit by a con man. He talked about financial dependency and emotional abuse, about a daughter overwhelmed by the burden of caregiving. He made it sound like she was the one who'd been locked in that basement. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said to the jury, pacing with theatrical sadness, "my client is not a criminal. She is a daughter who made a terrible mistake under the influence of a man who preyed on her love for her parents." He rested his hand on Rachel's shoulder like a father might, and she began to cry softly. Theatrical or not, it twisted my gut. Alvarez stood, her voice steady, sharp enough to cut through the fog. "Mr. Fields, the prosecution would like to introduce new evidence." She clicked a button on the projector. The courtroom lights dimmed, and on the screen appeared a string of emails, the ones I'd found on Rachel's laptop. Miss Sullivan, Alvarez said, using her real name, not the alias she'd tried to flee under. "Did you or did you not write this email?" Rachel's eyes flicked up. "I don't remember." "Then allow me to read it aloud," Alvarez said. She turned to the jury, her voice unwavering. "Mom won't remember. A few days in the basement won't kill her." A gasp rippled through the room. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Alvarez let the silence hang heavy as lead. "Miss Sullivan, were these your words?" Rachel's tears stopped. She looked down at her hand cuffed together, her thumb rubbing a nervous circle over her wrist. "Miss Sullivan," Alvarez pressed, "who put your mother in that basement?" No answer. "Was it your husband, Ben?" Still nothing. "Did you order him to do it?" Rachel's breathing quickened, but her lips stayed sealed. Alvarez stepped closer, voice soft now, dangerous. "Miss Carter, because that's the name on your fake passport. Who locked your mother in that basement?" Rachel's knuckles went white. Her eyes darted toward the gallery where I sat in the second row. For a moment, she looked like she might speak. Then she lowered her head. "I have nothing to say." Alvarez turned to the judge. "Let the record reflect that the defendant refuses to answer." The judge nodded. "So noted." Rachel's lawyer tried to interject, mumbling about mental health evaluations and undue influence, but the damage was done. The jurors weren't looking at her with pity anymore. They were looking at her like she was a stranger who'd walked into their homes and stolen something sacred. When court recessed, I stayed seated as the room emptied. The guards led Rachel past me. She hesitated when she reached my row, maybe hoping I'd say something, some last flicker of fatherly grace. But there was nothing left to say. I looked at her, really looked at her the same way you look at a gravestone, when you know you'll never come back. The child I'd raised was gone. The woman walking past me was just a ghost in her skin. My hand trembled on the bench as I whispered, "My daughter's dead. That thing walking out of here, it's just the shell she left behind." She stopped mid-step like she'd heard me, then kept walking. The cuffs clinked softly with every step, a slow metallic rhythm that followed me long after she was gone. A month after the trial, I thought the story was finally over. Rachel had been denied bail. The case was moving toward sentencing. And Ben, the man who'd dragged my daughter into the depths, was still missing somewhere south of the border. Then one morning, as I was fixing coffee in the kitchen, the phone rang. The voice on the other end belonged to Agent Miller. "Mark," he said, no preamble, "Ben's been found. Or what's left of him." I set the mug down, the ceramic clinking too loud against the counter. "Found where?" "Outside Monterrey, Mexico. Local police were chasing a stolen van. It rolled. Gunfire was exchanged. He took 2 in the chest. Died at the scene." I waited for the relief that never came. Miller continued, We confirmed his identity through dental records. But there's something off. The locals found no wallet, no passport. Whoever was with him stripped the body clean. We're still looking into it. Was Rachel informed? She will be, Miller said. Might even use it as leverage for her cooperation. But between you and me, she's not talking to anyone. When I hung up, I stood by the window staring at the snow falling outside, soft and silent. Ben was gone, and yet the victory felt hollow, like justice had tripped before reaching the finish line. That was when the letter came. 2 days later, a plain white envelope with no return address appeared in my mailbox. My name typed neatly, no handwriting. Inside, just one sheet of paper. No words, no note. Just a single photocopy of a transfer agreement. The letterhead read, Atlas Crypto Holdings, Founding Agreement. And there in bold ink at the bottom were 2 signatures. Ben Carter, partner. Rachel Sullivan, founder and CEO. I read it twice, then a third time, but the letters didn't change. The realization hit like a slow, cold burn. Rachel hadn't been Ben's accomplice. Ben had been hers. The entire company, every scam, every laundered dollar, every lie had been hers from the beginning. My hand trembled as I turned the paper over, half expecting another clue, a name, anything. But it was blank. And that was what scared me most. Whoever sent it knew where I lived, knew what I didn't, knew enough to remind me that my daughter wasn't just guilty, she was the architect. That night, I couldn't shake it. The letter sat on my desk like a curse whispering in the dark. I called Miller first thing in the morning. The envelope, I told him. No fingerprints, no return address. But you need to see this. He met me at my house by noon. When I handed him the document, he frowned, scanning the details. This changes things, he said finally. If it's legitimate, it means Rachel orchestrated the entire fraud. Ben was just the front man. Can you verify it? We'll try. But the timing's suspicious. Why send this now, and from where? He left with the document sealed in an evidence bag, promising to trace the paper's origin. I watched his car pull away, the snow swallowing its tire tracks. That night, I made a decision. The next morning, I drove 2 hours to the Women's Correctional Facility in Grafton. The kind of place that looks clean on the outside, brick walls, manicured shrubs, but hums with quiet misery behind the gates. The guard led me to a visiting room, with 2 plastic chairs and a metal table bolted to the floor. The air smelled faintly of bleach and resignation. When Rachel walked in, I barely recognized her. Her hair was shorter, her skin pale under the fluorescent light. The arrogance was gone, but something colder had taken its place, an eerie calm, the kind predators have when they realize the cage fits just fine. She sat down across from me, folding her hands neatly. Dad, she said softly, as if we were meeting for Sunday coffee. I didn't return the smile. I placed the photocopy on the table between us. Explain this, I said. Her eyes flicked down, then back up. You got my mail, huh? My blood froze. Your mail. She tilted her head slightly, studying me. I wanted you to know the truth. You've been telling yourself Ben was the monster. He wasn't. He was just convenient. I swallowed hard. So you were in charge. You ran everything. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Someone had to. Ben was reckless. I was careful. I built Atlas. He just sold the dream. My hands clenched on the table. You used your mother's illness to steal from her. You signed her name, locked her in that basement. How the hell do you live with that? Rachel leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that sliced through the air. Because Dad, Mom, lived her whole life for you. Every choice she made, every hour she worked, every dream she buried, it was all about you. I just evened the score. I stared at her, speechless. She continued, "You want to know the truth? I didn't hate her. I pitied her. Watching her fade every day, watching you cling to a life that was already gone. It was pathetic. The money was never about greed. It was about control. For once in my life, I wanted to control something. Control." My voice cracked. "You controlled nothing. You destroyed everything." Rachel's expression hardened. "Maybe. But at least I did something. You just watched it all happen." The guard shifted in the corner, uneasy as the silence grew heavy. Finally I said, "You used the intelligence your mother gave you, the patience, the discipline to destroy her. You realized that Rachel's gaze didn't waver. Mom wasted her life serving you. I just corrected the imbalance." Her voice was so calm, it chilled me more than any scream could have. I stood slowly, heart pounding, eyes burning with a fury I hadn't felt since the day I'd found Linda in that basement. "You think you balanced something," I said quietly. "All you did was damn yourself." She smirked faintly. "You wouldn't understand. You still think this is about morality." The guard touched my shoulder. "Time's up." I nodded, but I couldn't take my eyes off her. The woman across from me wasn't my daughter anymore. She was the ghost of who she could have been, ambition twisted into cruelty, brilliance poisoned by resentment. As I walked toward the door, she called out behind me almost casually, "Don't believe everything you hear about Ben." I froze. What's that supposed to mean? Rachel just smiled, slow and deliberate. "Dead men don't send mail, do they?" The door buzzed, the lock clicked open, and I stepped into the corridor, the words echoing in my head. Outside, the sky was the color of lead. I stood by my car, for a long time, staring at the gate behind me. If Ben was truly dead, then who sent that letter? The thought hit me like a shot to the spine. Ben wasn't dead. He was still out there. And he wanted me to know. It started with a name that shouldn't have existed. 2 weeks after visiting Rachel in prison, I got an encrypted email from an anonymous sender. No subject, no signature, just a single line and an attachment. "If you're still looking for Ben Carter, try looking under Daniel Reeves, Reno, Nevada." Attached was a blurry photograph. A man stepping out of a luxury SUV at a gas station, shorter hair, beard, sunglasses, but unmistakably Ben. "Dead men don't fuel up at Chevron." I forwarded the message to Agent Miller, without hesitation. He called me back within the hour, his tone sharp and alive again, after months of bureaucratic exhaustion. "Mark, if this is real, we're dealing with identity fraud at a federal level. But we need to confirm before we make a move." "How?" I asked. "Let's just say we're going fishing," Miller replied. "And you're coming with me." Reno looked like a bad copy of Las Vegas, same neon, less soul. The kind of town where people came to disappear. Miller and I sat in an unmarked van, across from a high-end office suite, bearing a sleek brass plaque, Reeves Capital Management. "That's our ghost's new shell company," Miller said, flipping through his tablet. "Registered 6 months ago under the alias Daniel Reeves. Guess what business he's in? Crypto, partly. Mostly funneling investment funds into something called the Freedom Growth Initiative. Sounds patriotic, right? It's actually a political PAC. And guess whose name is all over the donor list?" He turned the screen toward me. The face staring back was that of Senator Douglas Pierce, a man who'd built his career preaching about fiscal responsibility and American transparency. I blinked. "You're telling me a sitting senator's involved in laundering my wife's stolen money?" "Indirectly," Miller said. "Ben funneled part of your missing funds through dummy accounts into Pierce's PAC. It's classic cover work. But if we expose this, it won't just be a fraud case. It'll blow open a political scandal." For the first time, I realized why someone might have sent me that letter. This wasn't just about revenge or unfinished business. It was about cleaning up loose ends, and I was one of them. That night back home in Ohio, The first warning came. Someone broke into the garage. Nothing stolen, nothing touched, just the back door, jimmied open, and a faint smell of cigarette smoke lingering in the cold air. Miller sent a local officer to patrol, but we both knew what it meant. Someone was watching. The next day I found an envelope taped to my mailbox. Inside, no letter, just a photograph of me standing in the hospital parking lot with Linda. The words, "Stop digging," were scrawled on the back in black marker. I called Miller immediately. "They're trying to scare you," he said, "which means you're close. Stay home. Keep lights on. I'll arrange surveillance." But fear wasn't the thing eating me alive. It was guilt. Because while I was out chasing ghosts, Linda was fading faster. She'd stopped recognizing me some mornings. Sometimes she'd mistake me for her brother. Sometimes she'd ask where Rachel was, and when I didn't answer, she'd look down like some part of her already knew. Her neurologist told me the stress had accelerated everything. The damage was irreversible now. The woman I'd loved for 40 years was slipping behind a veil that no one could reach through. One evening, while the sun bled gold through the curtains, she had a moment of clarity. She was sitting by the window, hands folded in her lap, eyes steady for the first time in weeks. "Mark," she said softly, "you look tired." "I'm fine." I lied. "No," she said, shaking her head faintly. "You're fighting something again." I knelt beside her and took her hands in mine. "I just wanted to end Linda. All of it. I want peace." She smiled a small, sad, knowing smile that made her look like the woman I married all over again. "Don't let evil win, Mark. Promise me that." Her voice trembled, but her eyes were clear as glass. "Not with anger. With truth. That's how you beat it." I nodded, but I couldn't speak. My throat felt like gravel. The next day Miller called. "We've verified it," he said. "Ben Daniel Reeves is real. We're setting a sting. He's hosting a private investor dinner in Lake Tahoe this weekend. If we can link him to the laundering, he's finished." "What do you need me to do?" "Nothing reckless," Miller warned. "You'll be in the room as a potential investor. You play your part, record everything, and let us move in." Understood. That night, I sat by Linda's bedside as she slept. Her breathing was shallow, her skin almost translucent under the lamplight. I reached over, brushed a strand of silver hair from her forehead, and whispered, "I'll finish this. For you." And then I saw it. Through the thin curtains outside the front window headlights. A black sedan parked across the street, engine idling, lights trained directly on the house. It didn't move. For 10 minutes, I stood there watching those beams slice through the darkness, white and unblinking. Someone was watching, waiting. I tightened my grip on Linda's hand, her pulse faint, but steady beneath my fingers. "I promised you, sweetheart," I whispered, "and I don't break promises." Outside, the headlights flickered once like an acknowledgement, before the car slowly pulled away into the night. But even after it disappeared, the light stayed burned into my vision, an afterimage of everything I was about to risk. And I knew then the next move would draw blood. A full year had passed. The dust had settled, the trials had run their course, and yet the echoes of it all still lived in every quiet corner of my life. Rachel was sentenced first 15 years in federal prison for elder abuse, financial fraud, and unlawful confinement. The judge called her actions a cold, deliberate cruelty disguised as intellect. She didn't flinch when the sentence came down, didn't cry, didn't look back at me. 2 months later, they caught Ben. The FBI cornered him outside a private airfield in Arizona trying to board a charter plane under yet another false name. He pled guilty to federal laundering and conspiracy, 20 years, no parole, for at least 12. Miller called me afterward and said only one thing: some people think they're too smart for the law. Turns out, justice just takes its time. Justice. Funny word. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like surviving a war that leaves you with fewer people than you started with. By spring, the house felt too big. Every creak in the floorboards carried memories of laughter that would never return. I sold it, the same home Linda and I had built piece by piece, the one where we raised Rachel, where we painted the kitchen yellow, because she said it looked like sunlight. The proceeds barely covered what we owed after the fraud, but it was enough to move Linda into a long-term care facility near Lake Erie, a quiet place with pine trees and nurses who spoke gently. The first time I visited, she didn't recognize me. She was sitting by the window, staring out at the lake, as if it were a movie she'd seen once long ago. When I said her name, she turned polite, but uncertain. "Do I know you?" she asked softly. The words cut deep, but I forced a smile. "It's me, Linda. Mark." She tilted her head, studying me the way you study a stranger whose face feels almost familiar. Then she reached out and took my hand. Her skin was paper-thin warm, trembling slightly. "I don't remember," she whispered, "but I know. You're the one who didn't leave me behind." For a long time I couldn't speak. I just held her hand and let the silence fill the space where memory used to live. Summer came slow to Erie. The water turned the color of tarnished silver under the morning sun, and the air carried that soft, forgiving scent of pine and rain. One afternoon I stood on the shore holding a small tin box. Inside was a stack of paper documents that once represented the future Rachel stole from us, the Sullivan Family Trust Fund. I'd kept them for months, unable to let go, unable to forgive. But standing there, the wind off the lake pushing at my coat, I realized forgiveness wasn't about letting them go free. It was about freeing myself. I knelt, opened the tin, and took out the last page, the one that read Rachel's Trust Fund. I tore it into pieces small and thin as snowflakes and let them drift into the water. They scattered, floated, then sank slowly, carried away by the current. As the last shred disappeared, I felt something unclench inside me, something that had been tight and cold for far too long. I watched the horizon, the sky stretching wide and endless over the lake, and I spoke quietly, the words coming not from anger, but from a place deeper than sorrow. "Justice isn't about revenge," I said. "It's about not letting cruelty rewrite our story." I lost my daughter to greed, but I won back the piece of my soul that still believes in grace. The breeze caught my voice and carried it across the water. I stood there a while longer, the weight of everything, love, loss, forgiveness, settling somewhere I could finally bear it. Then from the satchel slung over my shoulder, I pulled out an old transistor radio. It was battered, the paint chipped, the dial cracked, but when I turned it on, it still worked. A soft jazz tune drifted through the static, the same one Linda used to play while cooking dinner on warm evenings, humming along, swaying in the kitchen light. The melody wrapped around me, gentle, haunting, and beautiful. I closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I didn't see the basement, or the courtroom, or the betrayal. I saw Linda young again, dancing barefoot in the kitchen, laughing under the hum of a trumpet. The song played on, as the sun slipped low, casting gold across the lake. And for one quiet, merciful moment, the world felt whole again. You spend your whole life thinking justice means punishment, until you realize it really means peace. I couldn't save my daughter from herself, but I could save what's left of the love she was born from. Linda may not remember me anymore, but she'll never be alone. Justice isn't revenge. It's remembering who you are, even after the darkness tries to make you forget. For every soul that's been broken by betrayal, may you still find grace.